if this gentleman needs an introduction. He's very humble when I invited him on to the show. But this guy, born in New York City, moved to South Florida early on in his career, early on in his life. He's won Emmy Awards. He's been on Miami Vice as their animal handler. He's none other than ZooMiami's Ron Magill. Ron, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us today.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, let's start right here. You've been at ZooMiami for 40 years. I know you're in the midst of reopening after the COVID-19 pandemic, and you've been through a lot. You've been through hurricanes in South Florida. How does this all compare to what you've been through?
It's a bit surreal. And I'll explain to you why. I mean, I've been here, like you say, 40 years, been here where we've had to close the zoo before due to hurricanes, specifically Hurricane Andrew, which was catastrophic for us. But closing the zoo back then, we would go out into the park when the zoo was closed, and it was devastating. It was just destruction everywhere. So it was different. I mean, you felt this burden of why it was closed. This was a horrific thing we had to rebuild from. The irony with COVID-19 is we go out, the park is beautiful. It's a sunny day. The animals look great. I mean, everything is beautiful except there's no public in there. And one of the things that really came to light for me that it took me a while to really comprehend it was that not only were there no public, but there's no man-made sounds. You heard no cars, no planes were even flying overhead, no radios, no people, none of these man-made sounds. All you heard were the animals and the wind. And it was just beautiful. I mean, it was just, I got to be honest with you, there was a silver lining to this whole thing in the sense that I was many times able to walk through the zoo and, every now and then you hear the lion, where you hear the gibbons, primates calling, and you heard the birds in the aviary. As a matter of fact, during this time, I made a film in the aviary because I went in there and I said, gosh, I don't know if I've ever been in here when I just heard the birds and the waterfalls and nothing else. And really, to see this all kind of come to life was a beautiful silver lining to an otherwise very challenging time.
That's interesting way of putting it, kind of a positive spin to an overall tough situation. And the membership comes back in the last, I guess yesterday was the first day that they came back. How are they dealing with it all? Are they looking forward to the reopening as much as I'm sure you are?
No, the members have been great. I mean, the number one thing I've got emails and texts and photographs from parents with their kids, screaming and crying in the house going, listen, I love my kids, but I don't like them right now. We have got to get them out. We've got to get them out of this cabin fever. I've heard parents tell me, whatever we're paying teachers, it's not enough, because they realize after having to teach their kids at home through this, surreal virtual school, it's not easy being a teacher. And I had some kids tell me in front of their parents, yeah, my mom really is a terrible teacher, So there's a lot of appreciation you get out of it if you look at it the right perspective. The members are elated. There are, of course, some changes, some things that have to be adhered to now. You can't come into the zoo without having a face mask. Once you're in the zoo, if you're able to social distance, you can remove that face mask. Some of our interactive activities, feeding the giraffe, feeding the rhino, the carousel, the water play areas, they're closed for now because we're trying to keep not only social distancing between people, but also between the animals, because quite frankly, I don't think we still know what animals can catch this or not. We do know, tigers can catch it, domestic cats, domestic dogs, ferrets. So, in order to protect not just ourselves, but the animals also, we got to maintain that distance.
That's great. Well, I know from our perspective, being a father of 3 young kids, get them out, especially around animals, something different to do, get them out and about, anything besides the 4 walls of the house. I'm sure that the general public is ready to move on. What better way to spend the day with the animals at the zoo? Now, in researching, I couldn't believe half the stuff. I mean, I'm an avid listener to the Dan Le Batard show. That's where I cross paths with you, and to hear him, reap praises amongst the humor and everything like that upon you, I couldn't believe half the stuff that came up in my research. And one of the things was, first of all, that you're a New Yorker, born in New York City early on, but I bet you, having been down in South Florida, you're more of a Floridian than anything else at this point.
Oh, there's no question. Miami's my home. Miami's in my blood. It's part of my culture. My father was Cuban. My mother is the daughter of a Colombian immigrant and a German immigrant. The Hispanic culture is something that runs deep in my veins. I'm married to a woman of Panamanian descent. So the culture that we have here in Miami, not that there isn't great culture in New York, there is. I mean, New York City, I don't live there anymore, but I still have to go back at least once a year to get that injection of just overwhelming cultural, blast that you have, that there really is no city in the world greater than New York City. Having said that, I can't really stay in there for more than a week at a time. I got to get out. Whereas Miami offers me, everything from the Everglades to the ocean to just the beauty, the blend of the culture in this city. It really is the magic city.
No, it's great. My wife and I, we go down to South Florida quite a bit. We have friends down in the Miami area, and we're from upstate, just outside of Albany. And we do the same thing. It's nice to visit New York City, see different things that you don't get to see every day, but live there and spend a life there, I don't know. That's for a different person. Now, having said that, if you stayed in New York City, I'm guessing without the family farm or the acreage that you had access to early on, maybe your path wouldn't have gone to ZooMiami.
Oh, there's no question about that. My father moved down here because my father's dream was always to have some acreage where he could plant mangoes and avocados. He wanted to have the groves that he had in Cuba. He loved the tropical fruits. He wanted to have horses again. And, he was able to achieve that dream for us. Came down here, bought a plot of land, built the house that we lived on, that my mom still lives in, on 5 acres. We had a stable with horses, had his grove of mangoes and avocados. I would go out in the yard and catch snakes and rehabilitate owls and all kinds. We had foxes, we had bald eagles on the property. It's just a fantastic youth that I had growing up, and it absolutely was the foundation for what I do today.
Oh, it's amazing. And then having noticed that you attended the University of Florida, and I haven't heard so much grief from Dan Le Batard for not staying home and becoming a Cane or anything like that, but you go up north because A, you had a good scholarship opportunity, and B, you knew in the back of your mind there was zoology might be a foundation that you want to hang your hat on.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, my dream was to be a veterinarian. I mean, I've always loved animals. I grew up in, like I said, New York City, but I had pictures of myself, feeding the squirrels and the pigeons. I just bonded with that. I tell kids who grow up today how lucky they are with the plethora of TV programming they have on wildlife. You have the Discovery Networks, Animal Planet, National Geographic Channel, BBC, Nature, all these networks of all kinds of programming. When I was a kid, there really was only one program. Well, 2, really. There was the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau that you would watch every month or so, would come on as a special. But every week on Sunday night, 7:30, right before The Wonderful World of Disney, I would watch Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And it was, like I said over and over again, that was church to me. I would go to that and watch that show so religiously. And the 2 hosts of that show they really were my inspirations, my icons for what I wanted to do in my life. Coming down here and being able to go out and explore and work with animals. I went to the University of Florida thinking I wanted to be a doctor of animals because I wanted to save animals. That's the thing, right? As a kid, you think, well, you want to be a doctor. You want to make them better. Unfortunately, my chemistry classes told me I need to make other choices. So I had to come up with plan B, and I said, well, whatever it is, I'm going to have to work with animals. I'm going to have to work outdoors. I knew that if I had to wear a suit and tie to work every day, I'd be suicidal. That's not to take away from people who do. There's some people who love that. They love to get dressed. They love to look sharp at work. Listen, if I'm wearing long pants and long sleeve shirt, I'm formally dressed. Usually a short sleeve shirt, sometimes shorts, and I like to be outdoors. I knew that's what would make me comfortable.
That makes perfect sense to a lot of us, I'm sure. So along the way, you get to the University of Florida, and if you're, from my mindset, from my perspective, you're telling your parents, this is the path I'm going to take. I want to go into the field of animals with an idea of becoming a veterinarian, and then maybe that doesn't happen. Talk to us about how supportive they were of your dreams, whether it's early on or throughout your career path.
Well, that's an interesting story. My parents have always been very, very supportive of my dreams. I mean, they have said, listen, when I was a young kid in school saying, this is what I wanted to do, I wanted to be Jim Fowler of Wild Kingdom. I wanted to be that, And people would tell me, you're out of your mind, you're crazy. You're the son of a Cuban immigrant, you're living in a small apartment in New York City, and that's not going to happen. You need to come up with plan B. My parents, on the other hand, always said, listen, you can dream it, you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself. And my parents really were the greatest supporters in that respect. Having said that, When I left the University of Florida and took a job on as a zookeeper, I could tell initially my father was profoundly disappointed. Understand, my father formerly only had a third grade education. Smartest man I've ever known. But formerly, he was only formally educated to third grade. Made his entire life just supporting himself and doing everything on his own. I was the first kid in our entire family to go to college. He, of course, had big dreams. Of course, veterinarian, doctor. That was a big thing. When I came as a zookeeper, and when I started as a zookeeper back in 1980, there was still some very primitive beliefs of what zookeeping was. And, my father, I'll never forget, he says, "What?" In a very heavy Cuban accent. "Do you want to leave college to shovel blank?" I said, it's more than that. He had this vision of a custodian with a bunch of keys, scooping poop and all kinds of exhibits. I said, it's much more than that. This is a field of wildlife and zoology that is very limited. There are very few openings. I need to take this opportunity now. And I'll never forget, he took a big sigh. I could tell internally he was disappointed, but he didn't really want to show me that. And he said, "Listen, son, I don't care what you do. You be a sanitation worker. Just be the best sanitation worker you can be. And be happy. If you're happy, that's the most important thing." And it's so true. I tell people when I speak, I'm asked to speak at these career days all the time, to speak to kids at school. And I try to tell kids that at a time when it seems so many people are so focused on material things, on how much money they're going to make, what are they going to be able to buy, they're losing focus of the things that are really important. Is what is going to make you happy day in and day out. I can tell you honestly that I know people who are so much more financially wealthy than I am, millions of dollars in the bank, and they're miserable human beings. And all they tell me is, "Oh my gosh, what I wouldn't do to do what you do. What I wouldn't give to do what you do." Because, I say this, and I know it's an old cliche, but I love what I do. It's the reason why I could do it for 40 years. I really feel I've never truly worked a day in my life. I would do this for nothing. I always tell people, when you get paid to do something that people pay to do, it's a scam. I've traveled around the world. I've set foot on every continent on this planet. I've gone swimming with sea lions off the Galapagos Islands. I've tracked tigers on elephant-back in India. I've radio-collared lions in the Serengeti. I've tracked polar bears in the Arctic. These are things that I just dreamed of as a little kid. And being able to do them on more than one occasion, I'll be honest with you. I'm 6'6", 235 pounds. I'm not a small guy, but it brought me to tears. I would sit there and sometimes I'd sob, realizing where I was and what I was doing. So it's been a real blessing to me, and I try to tell people that all the time. Don't get so caught up in the money. And what my parents always told me, they said, "Listen, if you love what you do, if you really love what you do, you're going to do it well, and the money will come." I'm never going to be a multi-millionaire, but I'm really happy. I own my house, I own my car, I have a beautiful wife, I have beautiful kids. I'm able to put food on the table. We just need to learn to understand that sometimes the more you make, the more you spend, and the more you make doesn't necessarily mean the happier you're going to be. What makes you happy is what you do at work. If you're not happy at work, where you spend most of your waking hours as an adult, you're not going to be happy in life. And no matter how much money you're spending or you're making, when you don't have the time to spend it or really enjoy it or be with your family or do the things you really like, it's not going to make any difference.
No, it shows your passion really comes across, whether it's today here talking to me or on the radio on Tuesdays at noon with Dan Retired. You're one of the most passionate individuals about their job. And in any piece that I read, you talk about, you look around the zoo and you can't believe that this is what you're doing. You're blessed to actually be in that position. And speaking of being blessed and living out your dream, I don't know what you dreamt going through your path, but to think that you would end up a multiple Emmy Award winner, and for some of us that grew up in the 80s on the set of Miami Vice, I mean, some of those things, I don't know which is bigger than the other.
I Sabado Gigante, I will tell you, for those who are not Hispanic, Sabado Gigante was probably the single greatest career boost of my life. And the irony is, I had no idea what that show was. The host of that show's name is Don Francisco. His real name is Mario Kutzberger, but he is the single greatest Hispanic celebrity in the world. Sabado Gigante has the Guinness Book of World Records for being the longest-running variety show in the world, anywhere. It had a weekly audience of millions of people, millions all over the world. And I never watched it because I wasn't watching Spanish TV, but I didn't realize how broad the reach was. When he met me here at the zoo, he says, I want you to be on my show. It was like, 35, 40 years ago. And I said, I don't really speak Spanish. My Spanish was horrible. I knew it's like 3 words. He goes, that's okay, I'll teach you. I'll teach you on the show. And it started out as kind of a gag, like they just make fun of my Spanish while I try to talk about animals. But then it kind of evolved, and it got all kinds of positive mail. And, I guess it's all about viewership and stuff. And they had these Nielsen Awards, and my segments would, really spike. And I guess people loved animals. And they also liked, a little levity. One of the lessons I learned from Don Francisco very early, because I was very apprehensive about going on a show that, for those that don't know Sabado Gigante, it's like a combination of Oprah, The Gong Show, Let's Make a Deal, and, This Is Your Life. I mean, it's a big collage of all kinds of television that went on for 3 hours every Saturday night. And it was kind of silly in a lot of ways. I mean, the Hispanic humor was a little over the top. And I was a little concerned, thinking, I'm trying to be serious about animals here. I love animals. He sat me down one day because he sensed that apprehension in me. He said, Ron, let me give you a little bit of advice from somebody who's been doing television for 50 years. He said, understand your audience and never take yourself too seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself, because when you laugh at yourself, people will laugh along with you and they'll embrace you. He says, look at me. And he was right. I mean, he would go and make a buffoon out of himself every Saturday. He was a pretty serious guy, but he knew what his audience wanted to see. And he said to me, Ron, you're on a platform now where you're reaching millions of people that you normally would not reach, because this audience isn't not necessarily the audience that's going to, tune into National Geographic every week. And he was so right. It opened up so many doors for me. I got connected to so many people. To this day, I've got people coming up to me, adults with children, who come up to me and say, I watched you growing up on Sabado Gigante, and I can't tell you how much a family enjoyed your segments. And it makes a profound impact on me when I hear that. I'll give you one quick story about what happened that really made me realize how powerful television, specifically Sabado Gigante, was. I was going down to do a documentary piece in the rainforest on the border of Panama and Colombia. I was on a dugout canoe going all the way down this river for 4 hours to meet an indigenous tribe down in the Embará tribe down in Panama. And I get there, and the chief comes to the car, dressed in nothing but a loincloth, and literally very indigenous looking. And he looks at me and goes, Bro Magill. I go, how do you know who I am? I thought I was being punked. Sabado Gigante. I go, Sabado Gigante, you don't even have electricity in the jungle. You're in the middle of the jungle. You have a village. Where do you watch Sabado Gigante? I said, come on, I'll show you. And they had set up in the middle of the village a satellite dish, hooked up, rigged to some kind of car battery, that every Saturday, that was like going to the movies for the village. They'd watch Sabado Gigante. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I remember I videotaped them in the village and brought it back to Don Francisco, Sabado Gigante, and he played it on the show. And to this day, that village is like the hero of the Embará tribe down there, because they were on Sabado Gigante. So, you just never know the connections you're going to make and the platforms, what they're going to reach that are made available to you. So he was a great mentor to me, Don Francisco. And again, not only learning how to communicate, but learning how not to take yourself too seriously all the time. And, Dan, you talk about Dan Levertard, he's a perfect example of that. Dan and I, he is like a brother to me. He is, without going into specifics, he's one of the most generous, warmest people I've ever known. But he's also very private. Dan has a very small, close circle of friends. I feel very privileged to be one of them. But Dan is also one that said, listen, we got to have some levity in life. Everything's not so serious all the time. Dan and I both get mail from people who think that we are actually mad at each other when we have our little back and forth on the radio. And I want to look at them and go, please, folks, the guy is one of my closest friends. We're all tongue-in-cheek. We're having a blast.
No, that's what I think it works so much. And to be honest with you, when I first tuned in, however many years ago, I was like, I don't know if this show's ever going to last. It's on a sports network. Yeah, it's on a sports network, and this guy isn't talking. And then the more I got into it, I was like, wait a second. I see what's going on here, and it's been the best thing. I mean, talk about getting through tough times, hearing your segment, all the other stuff that goes on because of what you said. They don't take themselves seriously.
Exactly.
And
he's the most self-deprecating guy on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, he's got really no ego in that sense. And he's also the greatest writer I've ever known. You know, people hear Dan on the radio, but when you read what Dan writes, it's unbelievable. He's just got such an incredible gift. He's an all-around amazing person, and I hope people can understand that, you know. And when they listen to the show, I mean, that's why, you know, Dan's dad has the greatest line on the show that they hit every night. You don't get the show. You know, people say, you don't get the show.
That's it. No. Yeah. Talk about the reach and your dream. I was about your trip going to Cuba, and the reach of not only Sabado Gigante, but just going back, seeing how their zoo was, kind of on a research / personal vacation. It had a profound effect to hear you tell the story about just the reach, the people that came up to you, and knowing that it was, you know, that country meant so much to you and your family for good, bad, and indifferent reasons.
I will tell you, you know, my father passed away over 25 years ago, but I always thought that my father's humor and the way he spoke was something that he got out of New York, because he moved to New York when he was 17. And it wasn't until I wanted to go back to Cuba. I wanted to go to Cuba. I'd never been there because I wanted to step on the land of my father. It's just something, you know, he passed away years ago. I just wanted to see. He would tell me stories about how physically beautiful the island was. He despised the politics. He despised the regime. But he says the regime, the politics is not what Cuba is. And and when I went, I tell you, I got an incredible backlash from people here in Miami. Mm-hmm. I mean, Cuban, you know, exiles laid into me. They just went, how can you go? You're supporting the regime. I go, look, I'm going there for conservation, for wildlife, because the animals in Cuba are not communists. They're not Republicans. They're not Democrats. They're part of a natural heritage that belongs to all of us. Animals don't recognize geographic borders. They have habitats. They have ecosystems. And the health of those habitats and ecosystems is a direct reflection on health for all of us. So, for me, the regime will not be there forever. But our hope is that this wildlife, this natural heritage that belongs to Cubans way before that regime ever took over, is something that is priceless and needs to be protected. And that was my effort going down, to work with them, because Cuba is not the regime that you hear about. When you go into the streets, and this is what happened to me when I went into the streets of Little Havana, and people started yelling my name from the balconies and going, Magill, they come down. Entire families want to take photographs with me because they're watching Sabado Gigante, which I couldn't believe they were watching because it's illegal to watch that show in Cuba, but they have something there called El Paquete, where they get these thumb drives with all the shows on them that they smuggle in, and everybody's watching. Everybody watches it. Everybody watches it. So I was like, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. And then they would invite me in for dinner. They want to give me drinks and food, of which they didn't have a lot of. And I realized when I looked at these people's faces and I heard them tell their jokes and I heard them tell their stories and dance, I saw the face of my father in every one of those people. There's something to be said about retracing your heritage, about going back to your roots. Cuba suffers beyond belief in so many ways, but I hope that people do not equate the boots on the ground, humble people of Cuba with the elitist regime that has ruined the island. So I am not going to condemn those people who need the help, who need just humanitarian compassion because of politics.
It was I think it was an interview that you did back when the trip took place, and it was a really good article. I want to know about the decision to go back once the borders were open. Was it a tough decision, hard decision? Was your immediate family supportive or worried about your safety or anything like that?
It wasn't a tough decision because it was my mother's dream. My mother had not been back to Cuba since prior to 1960. That's where, of course, you know, she honeymooned with my father. She said how beautiful the island was. They went to the Tropicana Club. They told me about all these beautiful experiences they had. She said it's such a beautiful island. And, you know, my mother never remarried. She never stopped loving my father. She's always She's 90 years old now, practically. And she's still, my father was the love of her life. She still lives in that house where they lived together that he built for her. And her dream was to go back to that island to see where my father was born. And I had no hesitation at all. I said, Mom, with my wife, I said, we're going to take you back. And I planned the trip where we landed in Havana. We went all the way from Havana all the way to Santiago, where my dad was born. We drove across the entire island. And it's one of the greatest things I've ever done. My mother became overcome with emotion on various occasions. And I could see how, looking at the beauty of that island, looking at the mountains of Santiago, looking at the beaches of, beautiful island, it took her breath away. And it made her feel closer to my father. It was one of those things that I really felt it was just the right thing to do. People get all caught up in the cost of things and, how many material things I have. And I try to tell people all the time, I've never seen anybody buried with their money or their material things. When you leave this earth, you leave with the memories of the things you've experienced. My favorite saying in the world is that life is not measured by the number of breaths you take. It's measured by the number of times your breath is taken away. And you need to have those moments. And my mom had several of those moments when I brought her back to Cuba. And through my mom, I had those moments too, as well as my wife. They took our breath away to feel closer to my dad, to see this beautiful island, to see the Cuban people, the real Cuban people, not the elitist, regime that's trying to do what they do. It just made me feel so proud to have those Cuban roots in my blood.
That's amazing. And for a lot of people that don't understand, politics involve both sides. When you come back from this trip, go back to South Florida, like you said, there's this huge backlash. How long did it take I would imagine you're associated with the local government there, to get them back onto your side? It seemed like...
I'll tell you what. It really didn't take long at all. You know why? Because when I came back and I told the story and I said why I did this, all of the people sided with me. And the politicians who may have had an issue with me, all of a sudden didn't have an issue with me. There's another old saying that I believe very strongly in, and that is, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. And once they saw the tide turn, they saw the reasons why I was there, and really it was for conservation, for the heritage of my mother and my father. People understood, and I've got to give tremendous credit to a woman named Fabiola Santiago from the Miami Herald. She's a big columnist for the Herald, and she wrote a column that was incredibly supportive of my trip. She said we have to learn to put politics aside when it comes to nature, when it comes to love of family, and when it comes to breaking down these preconceived notions of what other people in other countries do. And she's a Cuban American. Her father, I believe, was a political prisoner in Cuba for a long time. When she wrote that column, so supportive of me, that was it. No more problems after that.
That's good. So it's hard to top perhaps that trip to Cuba, but you've been places around the world that only people can dream of. If there's any place for somebody that's looking to go and explore nature, you've been in rainforests and up and down these great passageways. Is there some place that the layperson like myself, you would say, hey, you want to get a good idea of what nature is all about, you need to go to this place?
Well, it all depends, of course, on your budget. But I tell people all the time, listen, in our own backyard, the national park system of the United States of America is unbelievable. You can go to Yellowstone in the summertime and see some of the most beautiful scenery, the most beautiful wildlife you could ever imagine. Yosemite. These places are just spectacular. Right here in Florida, you go in the wintertime, I'm going in the summertime to the Everglades, but in the wintertime during bird nesting and the rookeries, it'll blow your mind. Now, if money is not really the issue and you want to be in a place that is going to absolutely blow you away and afterwards there'll be no trip that will ever equal it, the continent of Africa is my mecca. I've been to Africa over 50 times. East Africa, Southern Africa, each one offers its pluses. At this time, I would probably go towards Southern Africa only because as a first-time trip, Southern Africa tends to have a better infrastructure. You go into South Africa, you land at Johannesburg Airport, you think that you're Miami International Airport. It's good infrastructure, good doctors, good everything. God forbid something were to go wrong. There are private reserves out there that are spectacular, that gives you real good privacy, incredible luxury, and experience with wildlife that I promise you will change your life. If I had one wish, it would be to take everybody in the world for 5 minutes and bring them with me to some of those places I've been to in Africa, because it would change the mentality of the world on the importance of preserving wildlife and preserving nature. Unfortunately, most people don't get the opportunity to see that. But Africa, whether it be Southern Africa or East Africa, the wildlife in those places is unparalleled anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's right there. I was hoping you'd say something like that to kind of give me another nudge to put that
And it's not as expensive as people think. You can do it relatively economically, because you have to understand what you're getting. When you go to these reserves, it's all inclusive. Everything's taken care of. The food is unbelievable. It's safer than any major city in the United States. So please understand, like I said, I've been there over 50 times. I've never felt safer than when I'm out in the bush in Africa.
Yeah, well, for some of us who may have gone to Disney World a couple of times, just last year alone, maybe a trip to South Africa won't be, budget conscious as we may think.
Yeah.
Now, I also have to bring up the fact that as far as conservation is concerned, and you mentioned it, you're part of some great foundations of conserving wildlife. Is there an animal today that worries you the most about becoming extinct, or is there something that anybody can do to try to support the work that you're doing to make sure that these animals are alive for my children or my grandchildren?
Well, I'll tell you, people always expect me to say something like tigers, rhinos, elephants. And of course, those are incredibly dynamic, marquee animals, and they are facing horrendous challenges. And we have to do all we can to try to save them. Apex predators play a very important role in the environment. But, there are other animals too, and I consider this an animal, even though it's an insect, that play as much or even more of an important role, that are facing tremendous challenges. Their populations are plummeting around the world, and that is the honeybee. Bees by themselves, what they represent to us, not just as pollinators of plants and food, but as an economic engine to produce fruits and vegetables and trees. The pollinators, it's estimated that 1 out of every 5 bites of food that you take is directly connected to a pollinator, whether it be butterflies, whether it be bats, whether it be bees. And these things are all a direct reflection of the quality of life for all of us. And that's what I try to tell people. I say, listen, even if you don't like animals, you have to understand the role they play in providing a quality of life for us and our families and the future generations. So those are things that concern me. This out of sight, out of mind thing. People don't understand the connection that they all have to us. And, the oceans, my gosh. What the oceans supply to us in food, what we don't know. We know more about the moon than we know about what's down in the bottom of the ocean. This is scary, because there's so many things that we yet to discover, and there's so much the ocean provides for us for sustenance. If we're not protecting these things, if we take this all for granted, the amount of plastics that are being dumped. I don't know if you've ever seen these images of just islands of miles and miles of plastic in the middle of the ocean, and animals that, are killed and injured because of it. This is all catastrophic, and at the end, it has a domino effect. It'll start going down the line. We're at the end of the line, so we're not experiencing it so much in the beginning. But trust me, it's coming. And you don't want to get to the point where it's of no return. So, listen, I don't like being an alarmist, and I believe extremism in any form is dangerous. I believe there always has to be compromise. But having said that, we're in an alarming time. We're in what's called the Anthropocene right now, which is the sixth great extinction. It's the greatest extinction since the dinosaurs, happening right now primarily because of man. Again, I don't want to be an extremist. Extinction is a natural process. Many animals became extinct. Millions of them became extinct over the years that had nothing to do with mankind. What we need to pay attention to is how this has been expedited now because of mankind. It's an unnatural rate of extinction that could be catastrophic.
I think, whether you're an environmentalist or whatever, you're living in this planet, and to not take care of it, I don't understand it.
And it doesn't take that much. One of the things that I think people hopefully have seen during this pandemic is that, wow, when we've given the earth a chance to breathe a little bit, it can recover. Look at seeing skylines in China and Los Angeles and places like that with a lack of traffic, a lack of fossil fuels. Listen, I'm not unrealistic. I know this is not going to go on forever. People are going to go back. Or maybe we can compromise a little bit. Maybe we can, tone down as much as we were using and see if there's a little bit of a balance that can reoccur.
Yeah, no, I mean, from those images, at first I couldn't believe it. I thought somebody had doctored those pictures of LA and the skyline, the before and after photos, and it's alarming. Not to mention how many trips to the garbage I've made each and every week on my own. You take stock in what the heck am I doing just for my own personal use. It's unbelievable. So hopefully, and I think from people that I've talked to and seen, they are actually taking stock and realizing, all right, there's a better way of doing things, and it's a harsh way to learn that reality, but hopefully there is some learning points that people picked up on over the last 60, 70 days.
I hope so.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I know we've gone a little bit longer than 30 minutes, but I wanted to end, I guess, on the very last portion, because I've heard this story a couple of times, and I thought it should be shared here to bring some humor to it. The story that I've heard on the Levitard show, and then it came up in my research, it tickled my brain a little bit, about the autopsy of the orangutan. I mean,
oh my goodness.
This is one of the classic ones where if you didn't know what the heck was going on, like those officers did not know, it unfolded. But do you mind telling that one again, fellas?
One of the things I do is I use a lot of biofacts to teach kids when I go to schools and stuff. And I use bones of animals, skulls and bones of animals. So when an animal dies, I try to prepare those biofacts. I prepare the bones, I prepare the skeleton. There was an orangutan that had been part of a breeding situation that had passed away, a large male orangutan. The owner called me and said, listen, I know you can use this animal to develop the biofacts. I said, absolutely. So I bought the animal to my mother's house. My mother lives on 5 acres, beautiful big house. And, next to the house, about 2 blocks out, is a glider port. People flew gliders all the time. Well, I'm thinking, I put the orangutan out on the driveway, and I spread them out, and I started to dissect them because I'm starting to get the bones out. So I'm starting to do basically what's called a necropsy, just an autopsy on the animal, to get all these bones and get everything prepared to do the skeleton on the animal. And all of a sudden, they're doing all I hear is that, whoop, 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 whoop. I look at the gate in front of our house, and there's a police officer there, 2 police officers with the lights going on. I go, uh-oh. So I go walking up there to them, and they've got their hands on their guns, and they're looking at me, and they go, excuse me, mind if we come in? I go, no, absolutely not. Open the door. I go, what's the problem? He goes, mind if we walk around with you here? I go, no, what's the problem? They didn't want to say what the problem was. And they go, well, can you tell us what you're doing right now? I go, yeah, I'm preparing a skeleton of an orangutan. And they go, what? I go, an orangutan? I go, come on, I'll show you. I go walking back, and they see this orangutan. They're all spread out. It's, I guess a little bit gruesome. And they just started bawling out laughing. And I'm going, I said, officers, can you fill me in here what's going on? He goes, we got a call that somebody was dismembering a body out here. I go, what? I go, yeah, they said they flew over and they saw somebody dismembering a body on a driveway. We got your address, and we were called out here to investigate. And I see it's an orangutan. I go, oh, my God. I mean, how far up was it? It's a pretty hairy body. I don't know how you can mistake that for a human being. I go, they must have panicked or something. And I was nervous out of my mind. The cops got a good laugh out of it. They were fascinated by seeing this orangutan. And that was the end of that story.
Amazing. I laughed at it every time. And I can only imagine the looks on their face when they came upon it. But, protecting the peace, I guess. Good for them.
Yeah. They were good officers, and they were real gentlemen. They were never regret. They were really fantastic police officers. And if I was in their position, I would have been a little freaked out. I got to admit.
For sure. Well, Ron, I appreciate it. I appreciate your work that you do. I know you took your time out of your day. It's a busy one, a busy week coming up. So thanks again for stopping by, and we'll listen to you and take a good look down at ZooMiami when we get down there, hopefully this winter.
I appreciate it. Be safe and stay healthy.
All right, you too. Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care.